Ludo, good to see you. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. So Ludo is well, I mean, it's key player, I think, in meta science and science studies more broadly. Very happy that he has joined us today. Ludo is a professor of quantitative science studies at the Center for Science and Technology Studies, Leiden University. Really do encourage you, if you don't know the center and Ludo's work, to take a look. There is a lot going on at the center more broadly. It's really nice place. And I also encourage you to follow Ludo on Twitter, because he's a great way to be in touch with all that is happening in the meta science space. So I think it's really one of those good persons to follow on Twitter. And Ludo is going to tell us about a recently launched, also very important initiative, Publish Your Reviews, and Grassroots initiative to improve scientific publishing. Ludo, thank you again.
Thank you, Giovanni, for a very nice introduction. Yes, I would like to share with all of you some information about the Publish Your Reviews initiative, initiative of which I'm one of the organizers, an initiative that was launched just a few weeks ago. And I have a very specific aim today, because I actually would like to convince you all to support this initiative. That's one aim I have, and the other aim I have today is to perhaps also learn a bit more from the decentralized science community, how an initiative like this one can be kind of strengthened in terms of how we think about, again, incentivizing researchers to actually change their way of working. So I realize I'm not the first one today to raise that issue, but also for this initiative, it is quite crucial. I should start by explaining what this is all about. So this is an initiative that was launched a few weeks ago by ASAP Bio. ASAP Bio is an organization that is promoting innovation in scientific publishing, in particular in the life sciences. And I'm one of the organizers, together with the team of ASAP Bio, of this initiative. So we have a website, publishyourreviews.org, and there you can, of course, find all the information. It started about 1 year ago. So 1 year ago, I wrote this blog post, and I wrote that blog post because I was rather frustrated. I started to realize that I do quite a lot of peer review of articles submitted to scientific journals. That's not because I'm in some way special. All researchers, basically, especially when you reach a certain level of seniority, we all do a lot of this peer review. It takes a lot of time. It's typically time outside regular office hours. In the evenings, in the weekends, we do all this peer review work. And I was frustrated, not because of all the hours I spend doing this. That's perfectly fine. I believe this is important, and I'm happy to do it. But I was frustrated because I was in doubt whether all this time that I spent is really time that is well spent, time that is spent in a useful way. And to be honest, I started to have more and more doubts about that. What's the problem? And this is just a quote from my own blog post. Typically, what we do when we do peer review, we make an evaluation of an article. That evaluation is shared with the authors and with an editor of a journal. So it's typically just a few people that will hopefully benefit from that review. Just a few people. And that, I think, is a big problem. So researchers that do peer review invest a lot of time in this. They put a lot of effort to go into the details of an article, to think about the arguments that authors make and whether these arguments really make sense, perhaps even to look at the code, the data, perhaps to even try to reproduce some of the findings. It's a lot of time investment, and just a few people benefit from this. And in particular, who doesn't benefit is the actual readers of the article. Well, they may, of course, indirectly benefit. So if the authors find your review useful and start to improve their article, then ultimately also the readers will benefit. But the readers do not immediately benefit. And what I mean by that is the following. Many articles are already available online nowadays. When they are under peer review, they are online on preprint servers. So they are already being read by people. Because more and more researchers, they just read the preprints and they don't wait many months or even years before finally the article appears in a journal. But these readers of the preprints, they cannot make use of this valuable information that can be found in reviews, because these reviews are not public. And that's, in my view, a huge waste of effort. And that's a problem. That's so much time, so much valuable time that is not used in a kind of effective way. And that's the problem I want to solve. And that's what Publish Your Reviews is about. So what I started to do, and that's also what I announced 1 year ago, I started to publish my reviews. So I do all this peer review like I've always been doing it. But now when I do this review, I do not only send my review to an editor of a journal, I still do that. But in addition, I also publish the review online. I link it to the preprint version of the article. And I hope that in addition to the authors and the editors, also the readers will benefit. So I'm not the only one who was frustrated. So this is 20 years ago. So that's really important. 20 years ago, Fiona Godley, she is well known as the previous editor-in-chief of the British Medical Journal. 20 years ago, she already kind of wrote about these topics. She said what we need is preprint servers combined with open commentary. So that needs to replace the current flawed system of closed pre-publication peer review and its false reassurances about reliability of what is published. So this whole idea that two reviewers behind closed doors can kind of decide in a reliable way whether a particular study is sound or not, that doesn't make sense. And that's what Fiona Godley emphasized 20 years ago. I think it's something that many journal editors also know and many researchers, but we do not always like to acknowledge this because it's a bit of a painful conclusion. She made this argument 20 years ago. We need to do all of these things openly, and we need preprint servers, we need open review processes. And essentially the Publish Your Reviews initiative is now trying to move the community in that direction. So we are not the only ones who are pushing for this. So there are lots of other organizations. I don't have time to mention them all, but that are also working on this. Organizations that create infrastructures, journals that promote preprinting. Many things are going on. So we see growth in preprinting, especially in recent years. So you see how this has increased. We see growth in journals that publish the review reports for accepted articles. Again, really big growth in recent years. And also growth in peer review, not for journals, but for preprints. So there's new ways of doing peer review outside the journal system. So that's potentially really a completely new way of thinking about how publishing can be done. But all of these things are growing. And these statistics are incomplete in all kinds of ways, but the main conclusion is it's all growing. And that conclusion is a solid conclusion despite the limitations of these statistics. So this is happening. This is great, this is important, but despite the huge growth, this is still only about a tiny share of all the research outputs that are pre-printed, that have publicly available reviews. So yes, a lot is happening, but it's still at a small scale. And Publish Your Reviews wants to scale this up. So this is the old-fashioned way of doing things. Researchers submit an article to a journal, the journal organizes closed peer review, and then at some point it decides whether to publish the article, acceptance or rejection, so not to publish the article. And articles that are rejected are typically then submitted to a different journal because authors want to publish their articles somewhere. So I mentioned that there's more and more pre-printing, so articles are actually already published prior to submission to a journal, increasingly often, fortunately, but not always. And at the end of the process, we see now also that increasingly journals start to publish the peer review reports for the accepted articles. But as I mentioned, it's a small share of all the articles for which this is happening. So Publish Your Reviews is an initiative that is in a very pragmatic way trying to change the system. So this is not a kind of a proposal for a radically different system. I have ideas about how this whole thing could be done in a radically different way. But that's difficult, of course, because it's kind of just very difficult to make people at a large scale change their behavior. So Publish Your Reviews is pragmatic. It just tries to convince researchers to change their behavior in a very, very kind of small, minor way. And that could, we argue, make a really big difference. So what we ask reviewers to do is the following. When you do peer review in the traditional way for a journal, consider to publish your reviews online, to link them to the preprint version of the article. And that is, as I already mentioned, helpful for the readers of the preprint. And all the concerns that people often have about preprints not being reliable can also be partly addressed by this. It also helps journal editors, because journal editors, when they receive a submission, they can actually look online to see if there are already reviews publicly available, and they can reuse those reviews. And this is also a major benefit because the peer review system is under a huge pressure, and it's extremely difficult for journal editors to find peer reviewers because there are too many articles that need to be peer reviewed, and there are not enough qualified reviewers. So we need to make the system more efficient, and by publishing the reviews, it's not only the readers that benefit, it's also the journal editors that benefit from this. So that's the idea. This is the website of our initiative, Publish Your Reviews. So here we explain the whole thing in more detail, and we explain all the reasons why this is a good thing and why this is important. The argument of providing context around published research and helping readers of preprints to better understand and better appreciate the research. That's an argument that we also make in this blog post, where we, for instance, argue that if we really want to move away from things like impact factors, which many people consider to be one of the big problems in the way publishing is done, but also in the way assessment in science is done. If we want to move away from that, we need alternative ways of providing information about the value of published research. And peer reviews is one way in which that can be done, publishing peer reviews. Well, we convinced quite a few publishers to support this initiative, publishers and journals. And also lots of other organizations, preprint servers, peer review platforms, research funders, organizations that are pushing for change in assessment practices. They all support this initiative. So for instance, some of you may know about this so-called Plan S, which is a plan for changing the publishing system, supported by lots of important research funders. They are also in support of this initiative that we launched a few weeks ago. And partly they expressed this in this statement that they published. We have ambassadors that are supporting this initiative, and that goes from early career researchers, PhD students, for instance, that feel that this is important, to professors, and even to, for instance, someone like Randy Shackman, who is, as you may know, a Nobel laureate. He's also, he has strong ideas about this, and he also really feels this is the direction in which we need to move. So he's also one of our ambassadors. Fulvio is here as well as one of our ambassadors. So it's a quite diverse group of people that all feel that this is important. And I would like to invite you all to also support this initiative. So you can do that by simply signing our pledge. And the pledge is as follows. When a journal invites me to review an article that is available as a preprint, I will publish my review alongside the preprint. That's the essence of the pledge. And then there's one more sentence which just states that you will make sure you don't reveal confidential information. So for instance, you should promise not to reveal the name of the journal to which an article has been submitted. But the main thing of the pledge is whenever you review an article and the article is already available online, then the pledge is about the promise to publish your reviews. So we have quite a lot of people who have already signed the pledge. Here you see some names from people in the science studies or the meta-science community, but there are also people from all kinds of other communities that are supporting this. And if you want to support as well, then just go to our website, publishyourreviews.org, and you can very easily sign the pledge. And that's important, of course, because that's also a way to create more awareness by showing that there is a kind of an initial group of people that feel this is a good idea. That's a way then for us to also kind of convince other people to take this seriously. That's what this is all about. To conclude, I have questions for those of you who know much more than I do about this notion of decentralized science, this incentive thing. I think there are two big issues here. How to incentivize researchers to preprint their work, so not to wait until finally some journal has accepted their article for publication, but to already publish it on preprint version. And second, how to incentivize researchers to publish their reviews. So basically, to do the thing that we are promoting in this initiative. And there's, of course, always, as always with these things, there's a small group of people that just feel this is important, that are dedicated, committed, and that just do it. And then there is a large group of people that kind of agree with the whole idea and are, in principle, willing to support it, but they need to be pushed a little bit to actually start doing it. And I would really value your advice on how that can be done, how these researchers can be pushed a little bit. That's it Thank you for your attention. And of course, don't forget to publish your reviews. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ludo. I think this is great. And I also need to go and sign a pledge, by the way, take a proper look at the website. I still didn't have time, but I will. And maybe a good way to start answering your question and ask to the DeSci community and attendees is for Jeffrey or Ricardo to actually explain how the peer review functionality, the ResearchHub works, because it's actually a nice feature of the hub that I think, in my opinion, is really interesting and it goes exactly in the direction that you mentioned, Ludo.
Yeah, so I think I can take this one. We have actually, revamped the version of our peer review. So what we can do in ResearchHub is you can leave a comment under specific papers that have already been uploaded. So that works only with papers that have already been published or preprints, for example. But let's say you have a paper that is already published or is a preprint. What you can do is you can leave a comment, a general comment under the paper, or you can choose the option of leaving a peer review. So that will be obviously transparent, all in the open. What you do is basically you assign a score, 0 to 5, and you break that down into the different sections that we have in a peer review. So for example, you can have how was the impact of the paper, and you can give a score to the specific impact. And how was the methodology, where the methods used by the authors are clear so that other people can actually reproduce the studies. And then there's a section on the results, so where the results actually explained in a clear manner. Did the authors also reflect on potential drawbacks of their not really drawbacks, but let's say limitations of their research? And then you leave a general score. So this is what you can do on ResearchHub, and you can do that in the open, and you have it basically similar to a comment. But what you could also be able to do is through our bounty feature, be able to request a peer review. So let's say you have a preprint and you basically want to ask for suggestions from the scientific community. What you can do, you can go on ResearchHub, publish your preprint, and ask for a peer review from a member of our community. And you can do that using our token, kind of like rewarding the user that gave you a peer review on your and give you some feedbacks and some suggestions on your paper directly on the platform. And this is basically the gist of it, of how it works. I don't know, maybe Jeff, if you want to expand on it, but I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I think that's generally it. I think also as giving a public peer review, we have a system of like kind of an upvote, downvote. So the community can see the open peer review, and then if it's a quality peer review, upvote. If it's not a quality peer review, downvote. And the person who uploaded the open peer review can receive rewards from ResearchHub, depending on kind of that ratio of upvotes to downvotes, on top of what the submitter of the preprint would be willing to offer them if they were seeking a a peer review from them by applying a bounty on that.
Sounds really cool. I should take a closer look at all of this. But indeed, this seems kind of aligned with at least the vision of also the Publisher Reviews initiative. Can I ask, so what is your experience in kind of the actual uptake of these types of things by the community?
So the feature is actually just like rolled out. Actually, the bounty feature is like pretty much almost out right now. So we're waiting to gauge to see how kind of the community leverages it, and to leverage it outside of just simply maybe like asking for somebody to help them with doing statistical analysis. So it's outside of peer review, but peer review is also one of the things. So stay tuned, I guess.
Great. I think something that might be interesting is, I don't know, Fox, whether you know of other projects that are working in particular on peer review that might be also interesting. I think it's even later on, I think it will be interesting for Ludo to know. And I'll also take a look, because I don't know on the top of my head at the moment, but I'm pretty sure other people are also working on it in DeSci. And then maybe we could take a look at a question from Patrick in the Q&A, which I think is very interesting. I don't know, Ludo, if you have a chance to take a look at it directly, because Patrick mentions the 550 movement by James Headers that I've never heard before, I have to confess, but maybe you do. So this is essentially advocating for journals to pay a scientist for under $50 per peer review. And the question from Patrick is, what do you think of financializing peer reviews, and whether this will make the whole procedure more sustainable, or could introduce more perverse incentives?
Yes, so that's a great question. I must say I'm a bit skeptical. I'm not sure this is really a good idea. And partly that actually relates also to a broader concern that I have. I'm actually not sure if we need all the peer review that is currently being done. So I'm not sure actually if we need to review all the research articles that are being produced. I would like to question it, and perhaps we only need to do peer review, feedback, evaluation of those articles that really matter, which I'm afraid is just a small subset of everything that's being produced. So that might be a different way to deal with this issue of kind of how to make sure we have enough capacity in the system to do peer review. I must, however, also say that I'm, of course, a bit privileged. I have a kind of a permanent position at the university, a decent salary. So for me, it's easy to say, well, payment is not necessary. And I also, at the same time, I realize that does not necessarily apply for others. So that's why I feel a little bit also uneasy to be kind of really too skeptical about this idea.
Okay, but I also think personally that this is something that, again, that perhaps in DeSci it is already being experimented on, right? Because we indeed don't know about this potential downsides of financialization or positive effects. So in that respect, I think it might be really interesting to see some experimentation, see what happens when doing it.